Hi, Ahmad. It's great to see you. With me today, I have Ahmad Bahrami. He is the manager over the Behavioral Health Division, as well as the Ethnic Service Manager in Fresno County. Ahmad, we're so happy to have you here with us today, representing our central region in California. And I know that you've done a lot of exciting work around the integration of peers within Fresno County. And we just want to take this opportunity for you to really share with us what it's been like expanding peer support services through your county. And then if you have a program that you would really like to shine a light on, we'd love to hear all about it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the opportunity, Andrea. Um, yeah, so we started doing some work in Fresno County about a year and a half, 2 years ago, looking at how do we improve involvement and integrating peers into our system of care. So as you may know, FSP programs and some of those types of programs require some peer components, but we wanted to go further and really how we could have that meaningful peer engagement. And so we actually had contracted and did some work with, trying to remember their name. I believe it was Resilience Inc. To provide some technical assistance and really looking at things that we could do. The county has peer positions classified in even within our department, but we've had challenges with keeping those positions full. And so some of the work with Resilience was to really look at what are some of the things we need to be doing, both in terms of maybe improving some of the job functions, improving salaries and wages, but also doing a better job of recruiting. And so that was one initiative we did. And then through our community planning process and some of the other activities we've done around program development, we really wanted to focus more on creating meaningful opportunities for peer involvement. So before, like I said, it was primarily in certain clinic settings and maybe in some of the FSPs. We wanted to broaden up the role of peers and see how we could really have peers throughout our system of care and in different levels and types of programming. So those are kind of the things that we looked at for the past year and a half, and now we're moving forward and trying to really bring those things about.
That's wonderful. So you actually created a county classification for peer employment. How
Yeah,
long did that take? Was that a hurdle, or was that pretty?
we've had that classification for a while, and it was actually prior to me coming to the county. But like I said, we've had some challenges in keeping those positions filled or getting people into them. And I think it was maybe because the wages for someone, it's like, well, if I go into this, do I now, does it cover my costs? And because it might be too high to where it may impact somebody's hey, if I'm going to leave disability or I'm going to leave work and go to work full time, does this really make it worthwhile? So there was a lot of potential challenges with it. I don't know as far as when the classifications were initially developed, but the work we did with Resilience Inc. was really to go and look at, do we need to update or make revisions to those classifications to bring up the wages and salaries, to open up as far as what are the requirements. And so we've been working on those, and at the same time, we've also been tracking, 3-4 different iterations of Senator Beal's legislation around certification for peer support. And I know now we're in, the latest version of that one. I think is SB 883. But we've been tracking that as well, because we felt that would really not only create more meaningful opportunities in our current classification, but would potentially allow an expansion of more positions, because now you're having a means for where revenue is also generated to
Right.
support some of those positions.
So my follow-up question, if so it sounds like you have the county classification, and then you probably have community-based organizations that also hire peers. So you have a couple different avenues for peers to meaningfully provide services within your community. So do you happen to know how many individuals you have peer employed?
I know our classification, it was a handful of positions, and I know of at least 2 peers, just because they're pretty involved in some of our different committees and work groups. But I know that we have more vacancies than we have peer positions filled within our county classification. I would have to work with HR to get the information as far as.
That's okay. Do you happen to know with your providers, do most of your MHSA providers employ peers, and do you happen to have a number?
Yeah, don't know the exact off the top of my head, but it would be something we definitely can gather. And it varies. Where I think the challenge maybe has been in the system is you have all of them have peer positions, but the type of peers or how the functions of the peers work may be a little different. And then I think where there tends to be maybe some disparity in terms of salaries for some CBOs. So I think depending on the projects they're doing and what their budget allows versus some of our more robust projects or projects that have more intensity, there's more funding to it. So those are things that we also looked at as part of that work with Reliance. And we also did another review of that when we had applied for the Mental Health Service Oversight Accountability's Mental Health Student Service Act grants. And so we were one of the counties that was awarded.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so one of the things we had put in there was positions for parent partners. And so we had to go back and look at, well, what are the wages that are being paid in the region and then our providers, and making sure that we up, while we had the opportunity this time to raise those levels, and really emphasizing that we were looking for that lived experience. So that obviously is going to be where with our educational partners. And so we've stressed to them of the parent partner needs to really be that voice. I mean, I can't say firsthand, so it's a little bit of conjecture, but I think historically we've called positions peer positions, and I'm saying in a system of care throughout the state that truly have not had that experience and voice. I think we've put peers in positions that really have not allowed them to maximize their experience. And so with a lot of new projects that we're doing, we're really looking for meaningful peer, positions. We don't want to take what may be a part-time, a volunteer, maybe a job, and say, oh, that's a peer position, check the box. And at the same time, we wanted to make sure that we're not creating these services and programs without that vital, important voice. And so a couple of the new initiatives and programs we've done were, we went and spoke to peers to give us input and insight into how to develop and design some of these programs and write them, and then create positions that we feel that are going to be, where the peers are going to be a significant component in these new projects.
That's wonderful. I would love to hear about one of your projects that's been really meaningful and successful with integrating peer employees.
So as I had mentioned, Andrea, I mean, we have the FSPs that have had the peers, and those ones I think are pretty standard. I think what we're really excited about is several new initiatives that are actually funded through innovations that are not only including peers, but one of them, for example, the Lodge, which was recently approved, is based around peer engagement, measuring peer engagement. So it's not a housing program, but it's really looking at how do we get individuals who have been homeless, who have for historically not engaged in services for a variety of reasons, and really looking at how do we get those folks, the folks that policymakers tend to say, well, the homeless issue is individuals who have mental health and substance use and don't want help. And so while we don't believe that that's the case, we said, okay, but let's target those individuals. And so part of the strategy with this model is to look at using basically Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If it's hard to engage someone and saying like, hey, do you want to make some significant life changes when they're cold, they're hungry, they're wet, a lot of those things, versus can you get someone into an environment where they're warm, they can wash their clothes, they can take a hot shower, they can rest and say, hey, you know what, let's talk about some options you have available. So that was the first part. The second part we wanted to do was see, there's been similar types of efforts, but we wanted to build it around peers. So majority of the staff are actually going to be peers working in that milieu 24/7, utilizing motivational interviewing. And we really thought that utilizing peers, again, folks that have had maybe similar life experiences, might be able to connect and relate better to individuals that may be coming into care, especially if we're looking in a community like Fresno, which is a fifth largest city in California, but there's areas of town and areas where we have those individuals who are not in our system of care that tend to congregate. And we thought that might even be another strategy to where somebody may be talking and say like, hey, don't I know you? Like, what are you doing here? Like, oh, I work here now. Like, how did you get a job here? And hopefully that kind of snowballs into effect. So that program is looking at, it does the model utilizing peers improve that. And so we had even put out an RFP for that project, and we had a couple of bids, and there was one that was very clinical heavy, had a number of clinicians and these things, which is not what we were looking for. And the awarded provider was the one that had two clinicians, and the bulk of its staff were peer support and peer support.
Wonderful.
So that one is going to employ 7 full-time peers, and it's got like a peer 1 and a peer 2. So even opportunity for entry level and increase. There's a supervisor position that is going to be the peer supervisor, overseeing the peer staff that's also needing to be a peer themselves. So we're really trying to advance the model of integrating peers into our system of care, but in meaningful ways. And this is a project we're really excited about. Andrea, while it's not one that we have because it's starting up, it's one that we think is going to provide some really great insights statewide into really what role peers play. Because I think we've had peers in there, but you have one peer in an ACT team, for example. And here it's like, no, we have a majority of the folks are peers, and really looking at what impact did they have, both from outcomes, both from project staff, but also one of the facets we're looking at is looking at the individuals who were served in that program, or clients, we call them individuals served, to ask them what role did having the peer help? Like what role, if any, did the peer, having a person who'd had similar life experiences and had gone through it, being able to assist you in navigating and engaging in the process? Because hopefully that's created a better connection, and that connection can lead to better engagement. So that's just one of a couple of innovation projects, but all 3 of our innovation projects that got approved were based on peers. Like I said, this is one we're working on, another one that we jumped on a statewide effort that the OACA put out for advanced psychiatric advanced directives. So as we're working on that, we've been working with the parties involved in that, and they've been stressing the model that we want to approach is to train peers, our peers in our workforce, to be the ones to help someone complete a advanced psychiatric directive, because they're going to have a better experience in being able to navigate that and knowing, hey, has this ever happened to you? Yeah, okay, let's include that in here. Then, for example, if I was doing this, I would not have that experience. So there's things that I'm not going to think about including. And so again, it's going to give a great opportunity for our peers in our system of care to get some advanced additional training. And it's going to ensure that a lot of the folks we're serving in our system of care now have that advanced psychiatric directive, to where at times when their voice cannot be expressed because of a crisis, because of an acute a situation, they have their words on paper in this psychiatric advanced directive that says, in these instances, this is how I want to be treated. This is who I want you to contact. These are things that work for me. These are things that don't work for me. So in an indirect way, we're going to utilize peers to facilitate a way to give individuals again, their voice, and make sure their voice is not lost in those times of crisis or hospitalizations or things like that.
Well, Ahmad, thank you so much for your commitment to ensuring that the role of the peer provider is being meaningfully implemented in your community. And I just want to applaud you for creating roles where there are opportunities for growth, because it is so important that we create those career ladders as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Okay, so we're moving to the southern region now, and I am thrilled to introduce our next guest, Dr. Veronica Kelley. Dr. Veronica Kelley is the director of San Bernardino's behavioral health system, and San Bernardino is a leader in the state of California with really expanding peer positions throughout their system and really embedding the client voice throughout their policies. So, Dr. Kelley, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course, thank you for having me.
So we want to take this opportunity to really hear about your successes, and maybe you can give us like a high-level overview of what your system currently looks like, and then we can take a deeper dive into some of your existing programs.
Sure. Well, we are a system that is lucky enough to have a fairly large peer employee group. So these are folks who have lived experience. for us, certainly we've always wanted to do this, but I will be frank, the Mental Health Services Act did help us implement this in a way that got us past some of the initial resistance. And so we have been able to embed folks with lived experience throughout our system of care. So we have a classification in peer family advocate, which is much like a parent partner on our children and family services side, and they've been very successful with that. So building off of that and building off of what we've learned from our substance use disorder side of the house, who have always had peer input and always been run through an addict helping addict sort of mentality, we've really embedded that in. We have about 40 positions that are classified positions, so they're full benefited positions. And those positions work throughout our system of care. So they might be in our clubhouses, which are consumer run, or they might be in our clinics. We have some in administration, and we have some in IT. Just depends on what the skill set is a person brings to a job, like any other job. And then we have people with lived experience who aren't just stuck in the peer family advocate role. We've had many who've gone back to school, who started as a PFA, that was their entree into the county system. Like many of us in leadership, we all started somewhere, and they've worked their way up, gotten an education, a formal education to assist them in their lived experience, which is, I think, makes you more marketable for many different things. And they have really added to our system of care. It is one thing to learn about something from a book. It is another thing to have lived it. And I certainly don't believe you have to have lived it to do it. But I do believe you have to have some knowledge or be able to respect the position of someone who's actually lived it, right? So, and I truly believe that as the director of our system, I hope that the people who are in our system of care, both our staff and our patients, feel our connection to the importance of the lived experience. I came up in a family of addiction. Everyone in my family is an addict, all in recovery currently. I'm the mother of a child who has co-occurring disorder, an opioid use disorder, and anxiety and depression. And so I really get it from a family member perspective, but that's not enough. I'm a licensed clinician, and that's not enough. We have to have the whole, everyone has to be at the table. Everyone is a piece to this puzzle. And so we have physicians who also have lived experience. We have a physician who's one of our regional psychiatrists who always speaks to this and really brings into his own leadership the idea about connecting with people outside of what you learned in school, connecting with people as human beings, not using such terminology as treatment resistant because someone doesn't want to do what we say, right? And we do have that here. That is our vision and our mission, is that client is central to what we do. We are partners in treatment, and client directs treatment. Whatever client wants, that's what we do. And we try and help them get to that step. So whether it's independent living, or maybe it's just to get through the day with less voices, whatever it is, that's what our job is. It's not my job to dictate what a person should do because I learned it in school.
See, and I'm so happy that you shared those examples with us, especially hearing about how you have peers working throughout the system. So you have them in direct service roles, you have them in IT. We're always saying how important it is to have them embedded in all teams. You even have a psychiatrist with lived experience. That's incredible. We want to see them in our cultural competence team and our quality improvement teams, and really ensure that we're driving that process through the lens of individuals that have been there, right?
Right.
So would you like to share your experience with peers and law enforcement?
Oh, yes. So we have a great program. Again, I said we built a lot of things, stealing a lot from our recovery side of the house to help shore up our mental health side of the house. And if I'm looking at all of my alcohol and drug counselors as well, about 90% have lived experience. So that means that they are living with an addiction, probably another co-occurring disorder, and 90% have a forensics background. So they've been intimately involved with law enforcement. And so that is, again, essential. So we do have a program called, it's funded through SB 82, called Triage Engagement Support Team. And those are individuals who are peers. They might be at a social worker level, so that's a classification, not a master's degree. So they're at these different classifications, and they have lived experience. And so those folks are co-located throughout our county with law enforcement. They sit in sheriff's offices. They sit in our they're in our public defender's office. They're also in our police departments throughout our county, in our emergency departments. So we even have some at Kaiser to assist. And so what those folks in that program does is they might take a call, like what you're hearing with defund the police, right? What it really is about how can we make better use of the police to protect and serve, and get folks who need mental health assistance or behavioral health assistance, addiction services to the right people without getting them involved in the legal system. And so those folks take those calls. And so a really great example is our Rialto Police Department. Our Rialto Police Department, Rialto's a fairly big city, and the chief there is really committed to wellness and believes in recovery and resilience. And he also knows he doesn't know how to do it. So that's what we do. We each stay in our lane and learn from one another. And so one of our staff who works for our test program, co-located there, one day Rialto responded to an incident. It was a hostage situation. SWAT responded. And it was really a man who was really desperate, just at the end of his rope, experiencing suicidal ideation, was probably really looking for a suicide by cop sort of situation. SWAT came in, the negotiators worked things out. He had a weapon. They were able to get him to drop his weapon and come out. And instead of them rushing him, they sent in our test staff. And the test gentleman, who again has experienced these very same things, sat on the curb with this man and just had a heart-to-heart. He listened to him. He didn't throw him on the ground. He didn't tell him how stupid he was to do this. He listened to him. And then after a long engagement, he was able to get the man to identify that what he really needed was treatment. And so he agreed to a voluntary hospitalization, because the cops could have rushed in and 5150'd him. And that's traumatic. There are people who absolutely need that, but this was not a gentleman who needed that. He just needed someone to listen. And so I think if you think about this, and we really believe this, that maybe that's our first line, right? Our first line is not a cop who's weaponed to put you on a hold. It's not a clinician who is weaponed with a hold writing, power to hit you. It is with someone who can listen to you, who understands, who's been there. And so that gentleman did not go to jail. He did not lose his civil liberties. He went in and got treatment. Just like we would go in to get treatment for an impacted tooth or, diabetes or something. He went in, he got his treatment, and he's functioning. And that was really powerful for the Rialto PD. They tweeted about it. That's how I even knew it had happened. They tweeted about it and they did a Facebook post about it, which is really significant too. And then they actually declared that employee their Citizen of the Year.
That's
so
amazing.
Just great example. Yeah.
That is a great example. Thank you so much for sharing that. My last question for you is, do you have any words of wisdom for communities and counties that are just now beginning to embark upon really expanding the client voice and peer positions throughout their community?
Yes, I would say, to steal from Nike, just do it. Just do it. It will add so much to your ability to serve community. It will certainly buy you trust. It validates all the things that we always talk about recovery and resiliency, and be aware that there are going to be some challenges. Stigma is a huge challenge. We see that both with our folks who have lived experience, them thinking that they can't do this. And that's just, maybe part of self-hate kind of thing, self-stigma. And then our licensed clinicians who think they're the only ones who know anything. And that's not true. And to get folks together, I think part of our stakeholder process that we do with the MHSA really helps bring everyone's voice to the table. And I think that can sort of start to decrease stigma. And then know that everyone kind of needs different things. So if you're having, if you're hiring folks who are straight out of high school or straight out of college, they might not know how to sign up for their health and benefits. They might not understand how they would call their doctor and get their prescriptions filled, because maybe their parents helped them. And in the same way, I think this is one thing we learned, is when you take someone who's been on Medi-Cal as their insurance, Medi-Cal's pretty good as far as we have access requirements. So you're in crisis, we can get you in. And I can speak for my personal insurance. That's not how that works.
Mhm.
I might have to wait 3, 4, 5, 6 months to get in to see my doctor. And in Medi-Cal, that's not the case. So what we found is we really took extra time to onboard staff who identified as having lived experience to ensure that they understood their benefits. Because we did have staff who were fine, but they needed a refill of their meds. And it took them 6 months to see a psychiatrist, so they just went without. And in the meantime, they started to decompensate. And they were embarrassed to say that. And so what we want to do is take that off the table. This is, we want to speak to each other, human to human. This is stuff that not all of us know. I know when I signed up for benefits, I didn't know everything I got. I don't understand a lot of the benefits that I had initially. And I think we need to keep that in mind when we are bringing anyone into the workplace. So we have an extra cushion built in. We want to make sure supervisors know that if someone has to go to the doctor, then you let them off work to go to the doctor. No shame, no shame. Just like anybody else who goes to their annual exam or to their dentist, you don't have to question things there. But I will say we are behavioral health, and so it is important for us to see all of our employees from that lens. And so for my deputy directors, when it looks to me like they're stressed, I'll ask. That's just part of being human. And so we really, I think that's another reminder that our folks with lived experience bring to the table, that we have to remember that we are all human and we can learn so much from them if we will just open up our systems and let them add to it. Because I think in our county, it's been amazing what we've been able to achieve because of the lived experience voice.
Thank you so much, Dr. Veronica Kelley with San Bernardino County. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.
So thank you so much. That was Dr. Veronica Kelley with San Bernardino Behavioral Health. And I am really excited to move to our Superior region now. And with us this morning is Holli Drobrvy. She is the MHSA coordinator for Butte County, as well as their public information officer. Holli, we're so happy to have you with us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to get this invitation today. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, one of the reasons we picked Butte County to represent the Superior region is because last year when we came to do our leadership training and our community empowerment training, we were absolutely blown away with how many counties were represented. We had 17 Superior region counties in attendance for the leadership training, and it was just absolutely fabulous. So the way and your support with really helping do outreach and get the word out meant a lot to us. So today, we really want to take this opportunity to shine a spotlight on Butte County and the amazing work you've been doing to really elevate the client voice. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate those kind words. Just a little bit about myself. I do consider myself, well, I've been working for behavioral health for 5 years. It was never my intention to go into this field of work, but definitely have the experience as a family member of an individual who has lived experience with mental health. So I think that really drove my passion, and peer integration and the client voice definitely has a special place in my heart for that reason. And so it's so valuable to have that lived experience and personal experience of someone you love having to navigate these types of challenges, and how important it is for the client's voice to be heard when it comes to their wellness and recovery. So I like to put that plug out there so you can see that it is a work of the heart. But is there anything that I can get started with today? Anything specific that you would like me to cover for you guys?
Yes, so what we would really like to learn is how you have been utilizing peers throughout your system as far as ensuring that their voice is being implemented in program development and design, and then how you're utilizing them in peer employment positions and how that's going.
Fantastic. So I think in the 3 years that I've been the MHSA coordinator for Butte County, we've steadily seen an increase in participation. And I think it's to the departments, you know, to their credit, that they have allocated resources to saying this is important. And we've been able to enhance kind of our systems for how we collect information, how we engage with the community. We have analysts that their full-time job is community engagement and support, as well as evaluating some of the programs that are within MHSA. So I do want to acknowledge that the department is saying that this is important to us, and we are going to dedicate resources towards that. We did have peer advocates, is what we called the position historically. That began in our system, I want to say in the mid 2000s, you know, that was way before my time. And that really was a person who that was hired, was already role modeling really wonderful wellness and recovery behaviors, and really being a resource to other clients in our computer lab. And so that was our first peer that was ever integrated into our system of care. And with the infusion of the Mental Health Services Act, we were able to expand on the peer workforce. And from what I understand and hearing history, and when I was really trying to understand like this road that we've gone on from the beginning to how we are here today, is that we were able to hire peers depending on really looking at their strengths and what would be a good fit for how they could utilize their strengths in our system of care, whether that be supporting clients as they navigate the system, or clerical support, or even janitorial positions. And it really is a way for them to use their lived experience in a role model capacity. And so back in 2012, a specific job classification was created for peer advocates at the extra help level, which means they're not a permanent county employee, they're part-time. And what we've recently heard through community input, most specifically in 2017, was we need to revisit that. We need to revisit the structure of how we're employing peers, in what capacity, and we reviewed the benefits, the salary, and so we heard loud and clear from the community that peers need to be enhanced. A really great comment that we received, I have a few quotes here, but we had a community input specifically relay that they would like to see peer advocates in a certification program so that there's a baseline knowledge among this awesome asset. Also a clear path for advancement for peer advocates. And so that was just one of many comments that we heard that year about enhancing our peer workforce. And so our director at the time, Dorian Cottrell, heard that community input loud and clear, and he asked that I put together a peer workforce work group so that we could really get this even extra layer of input from our peers. And so I actually was co-chair of that with Andrea Wagner, who is an Access ambassador. And that was a wonderful experience for her and I to be able to collaborate on that together. We began meeting in January 2019. We had peer volunteers. We had current peer advocates in our system. We had peers that had been promoted to counselor that no longer were using their peerness in their position because we wanted to talk about the career ladder with them. We brought peer supervisors, peer advocate supervisors into the mix. So we met monthly for about 10 months. And at the conclusion of those 10 months, we put together a written report of recommendations to the department saying, and it really was the stakeholders' voice, them saying, we're gonna go ahead and ask for the moon and hope to land on a star, right? And so really dove into every topic that we felt was important, such as the need for clearly defined job roles and descriptions, to include lived experience. That original job classification did not mention anything about using lived experience and how valuable that is. And as we know, we use this quote from SAMHSA to really guide our discussion. And that's the definition of what a peer is, depending on from what SAMHSA says. And that is, a peer provider is a person who uses his or her lived experience of recovery from mental illness and or addiction, plus skills learned in formal training to deliver services in behavioral health settings to promote mind, body, recovery, and resiliency. So we had that quote with us at every meeting to really just steer our thought process and really get that credibility of using lived experience, and having it in the job description is really vital and important. We also looked at the career ladder and the opportunities for advancement within the peer service provider role. At the time, if you wanted to continue to be a peer specialist, you could only be an extra help peer specialist with that minimum wage experience. And if you wanted to advance, you had to promote into a different position altogether. We looked at our trainings, the current trainings that we have in evidence-based practices and the way we train our peers. We talked about comparable wages nationwide. And introducing permanent or full-time positions so that individuals could actually accrue benefits and paid time off in an appropriate manner. So those are just a few of the topics.
I just want to pause for a moment and really say that over the past 3 years since you've been there, and I know Dorian very well because I worked with him for years.
I remember that.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that you are really listening to your stakeholders and creating that career ladder, because that is one thing we have to ensure that we have, many different pathways to meaningful employment, which includes, part-time, but not only part-time. For folks that, I was hearing that a lot of folks were having to work multiple jobs to be able to but their passion was to work in the peer workforce. So to be able to create these full-time jobs with great benefits, it's so important because we have to take care of ourselves before we can take care of those that we're here to serve.
Yes, absolutely. And so we really acknowledged that peers, the way that the system was set up as an extra help employee, they get 24 hours of sick leave and that was it. And that's not appropriate or adequate for any type of employee. And so when we looked at introducing the permanent positions, the permanent piece being the important part, not necessarily that it has to be a full-time position, but if they could be a permanent county employee and they earn those rights that come with being an official county employee, whether it's a half-time position or a full-time position, they get that, those protections and those extra benefits. And so that was the important kind of clarification, is that we wanted them to be permanent, and then we didn't want to say it has to be full-time only, because then that could even exclude some people who full-time isn't their thing. So that was another piece of it.
So did you have some recommendations that you wanted to share?
Yes.
Okay.
So, the peer workforce work group, as we lovingly referred to ourselves, really built this amazing camaraderie, and we had recommendations that we submitted to the department, as well as presented at a behavioral health advisory board meeting, just for kind of that extra level of credibility and we're going to share this far and wide and see where it lands. So the recommendations, there were 3 categories specifically that the work group had recommendations on, and one being enhancing the job classification, changing the title from peer advocate to peer specialist, because advocate can kind of pigeonhole the job duties, and really what they did is so much more than advocate for clients. They have specialized skills that really can do a variety of different things. And so we wanted to ensure that the peer specialist position included having lived experience as a qualification, and pulling on that experience to perform your job skills or duties, whether that's, actually talking about your lived experience to connect and engage clients, or just role modeling that I have had this lived experience and look at how well I'm doing now. Or so it's whatever the level they want to use their lived experience. The work group recommended that there would be tiered positions, so peer specialists 1, 2, and 3, and that the salary would increase based off of skill levels and trainings, and potentially if there is going to be a statewide certification at some point, that would allow, if you actually went through and did your certification and did all that hard work, that your salary would reflect that. We also recommended a peer support service coordinator, and really that was not so that there would be one person to supervise peers. It's really somebody to help guide peers through the system of employment, training, certification, as well as provide support to the supervisors who may not know exactly the best way to supervise a peer in their specialized skills. So those were the job classification recommendations. The second topic of recommendations was salary and benefits. So to implement regular help positions, whether that's in a half-time capacity or a full-time capacity. So that would ensure that a peer specialist would have the county protections of being a permanent employee instead of an extra help employee, and that they would be able to accrue paid time off and have access to benefits in an appropriate manner. And we also asked that the department establish an appropriate pay scale. The extra help peer advocate position was stagnant at minimum wage. And so we looked at other counties and compared to what they were doing with their peer positions, comparable counties, and even nationwide. And so we didn't say this is what we think peers should get paid, but we asked the department to look at it and make a decision that was more appropriate and in line with their skill level. And then last but not least was training and certification. We asked that the department create a new employee orientation track specifically for peer specialists, and that the peer support services coordinator that we talked about would identify and implement ongoing trainings for peers, and that they could really coordinate any training and certification processes. We asked that the department support statewide initiatives to implement peer certification. And we also asked that the department identify resources through MHSA workforce education and training component to support travel training and certification for peers. So those are, in a nutshell, those are the recommendations we made to the department, and that was in October of 2019. So where are we at today? We had some really wonderful pie in the sky plans prior to COVID-19.
Right.
So of course, as everybody is fully aware, the COVID-19 has turned everyone's world upside down. And the fiscal kind of outlook that we had in January changed very drastically in May. So the budget restrictions are really tough for the department right now, but the department did make a promise to implement these permanent full-time or part-time peer specialist positions. And so while originally the plan was to have 8 positions created with this new job classification, it's now only 2, but with the idea that we will expand as resources allow. But the big win here is that we actually have a job classification that says peer specialist with lived experience included in the qualifications. It really embodies the spirit of peer specialists. It's going to our board of supervisors next week. I think this, by the time you guys see this, it will have been approved. We're very excited about that. And so that's a big win for us. So while acknowledging that we didn't get to build it the way in the fashion that we had originally planned, we're still keeping our promise with getting it approved and getting that framework there to expand it in the future as the budget allows. Another exciting thing to report in this new job classification that's going to be approved shortly is that all peer specialists will get a $5 an hour increase. It gives me goosebumps. I'm so excited about it. And it's going to be similar to a behavioral health worker classification, and with the intentions that now this will be a 7-step salary scale, which is typical to what our county is like now. And so while we don't have the peer specialist 1, 2, and 3, we do have a peer specialist position, in coordination with the county. While we, like I said, we asked for the moon and we landed on some stars, and we're pretty excited about it. Currently, we have our peers in relation to COVID-19. We were able to adapt some trainings. We are partnering with Resilience Inc. to provide some trainings to our peers, and they quickly transitioned to a virtual platform. So we've been able to continue to go down that path, and that's a training that would have been 80 hours in 2 weeks. That's now been stretched out over 3 months. And we're hearing a lot of really good feedback from our peers about that training, and they're really grateful for that to have continued during COVID. We also have an online peer support program that the peers really collectively took ownership of and initiated. They felt really it was important that there's a online virtual platform during these COVID times. And then last but not least, I'm happy to report that the WET Regional Partnership, those funds that we received through OSHPD. Butte County really was the lead county for applying for those funds. So I got to steer that ship a little bit in the direction of peers. And we were able to get approval for scholarships for peers that they could put towards any types of career development. And it's really open-ended. It could be training, certification, it could be going back to school. And so we just learned that we were approved for that. So that is kind of a lot of information, but that's really kind of our current status of where we're at with our peer integration. Do you have any follow-up?
Congratulations. That's exciting. And you've accomplished so much in a relatively short amount of time in the last few years. So thank you so much for your advocacy and for your commitment to elevating the client voice and peer employment throughout your community. We're so grateful to have you with us here today, Holly. And again, this is Holli Drobrvy with Butte County.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
So we are moving to the Bay Area today. And with me today, I'm really excited to introduce our next guest, and the individual that will be representing the Bay Area is Sandra Sinz. I have known Sandra for many years, and I had the pleasure of working with her back when she was doing EQRO reviews throughout the state. And I saw firsthand how incredibly committed she was to elevating the client voice, as well as really elevating and ensuring that clients are being meaningfully embedded throughout the county systems. In 2017, she took the role as the Behavioral Health Director in Solano County. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to Sandra. Hi, Sandra.
Good morning.
Hi.
Hi, Andrea. Thanks for having me.
We're so happy to have you. So Sandra, this is an opportunity for you to really share the work that you've been doing in Solano to really elevate the client voice. So with that, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. Well, you know, when I first came to Solano County, we actually did have peers working in our community-based organizations, but we didn't have any in the county positions. And also we didn't necessarily have them in all of the community-based organizations, or if they were, they weren't necessarily identified as being peer positions. So sometimes they were hired because of their lived experience, but were in a position that didn't really highlight that was something that they brought to the table. So that is one of the things that we've worked with our CBOs on, is really actually working that into the job title so that it's very clear that that part of what that person brings along with their other skills is their lived experience. And that's been a little bit of a challenge, because there's some difference of opinion too on whether that's a value add or whether that's stigmatizing. And I think you can look at it both ways in terms of the job title, but we really wanted it to be, the peer role to be emphasized as part of the core meaning in that person's role on a given service team.
So I'm really curious, I haven't heard that before. So when you talk about the stigma, is that from individuals with lived experience, or is it from others?
You know, it's kind of been from both. We had in the system some people who felt that they had kind of moved beyond and promoted past being called a peer, and felt that bringing the label to the position was actually going to sort of diminish their role in a way. And so that was there, you know, that required some conversation for sure.
And I think, and I wonder too, if it's if it would make a difference if there was a tiered system. So if there were opportunities for leadership positions and growth opportunities, so that we had peers within management and overseeing other peers and a opportunity for growth.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that that is one thing that we still don't necessarily have, even in our county peer classification is it is a peer support specialist. We don't yet have sort of peer support specialist 1 and 2 or peer supervisor. That's not something that we've got yet. But we were able to, from the civil service perspective, a couple of years ago, get a peer support specialist position or classification created and endorsed by HR and county administration, and then approved by the Civil Service Commission, which is a pretty big deal to get full civil service positions. And
that is,
yeah.
and I know that's been a barrier in some other counties. So that's really exciting that you were able to accomplish that.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that actually Solano had a history back in the sort of mid to late 90s of having that position, but it was not called out as a peer. It was referred to as a mental health aide, but that was how the county did bring peers into the employment system. And we actually still had a couple of people who had come in during that time frame and had since promoted into the paraprofessional mental health specialist class. And so we've had peers in the system, but they were identified as peers some 20 years ago. So, we're now working as basically a mental health rehab specialist.
Yeah.
So adding the peer support specialist into the kind of different roles and jobs that a person could have was in some ways kind of going back to bringing back what there was, but bringing it back in a way that really emphasized in the job title the lived experience piece.
Yeah. So do you want to share how you're utilizing peers and elevating the client voice throughout your system, whether it be with committees such as the steering committee, or how are you using them to help support and drive your programs and system?
So when we got the new positions, and the county a couple of years ago approved three new full-time equivalent positions in the peer support specialist category, I had sort of thought that people were going to want part-time positions, and so my thinking was, okay, we'll play it depending on who applies and how many hours they want to work, but I had to sort of assign from the get-go what types of positions they were going to be, just to have a place to start, and then I was going to move it from there. And I sort of thought that we'd end up with 4 half-timers and 1 full-timer, and just sort of as a place to start. Turns out we had almost everybody that applied wanted a full-time job. And so we ended up hiring 3 full-time staff. And one of the staff is bilingual. All 3 that we hired were people of color and all kinds of great lived experience. And some of them also even had peer experience as either a volunteer supporter in our CBO programs or in the county programs, because we've had a volunteer peer program for some time where people did anywhere between 2, 5, 10 hours a week. And it turned out that actually the folks that we did hire had some experience in the system as a volunteer. And our 3 peers, one of them is embedded full-time in our full service partnership program, split between the forensic treatment team and the regular adult FSP team. we have another peer that is fully embedded in the adult outpatient, in one of the adult outpatient clinics, our largest adult outpatient clinic. And then the third peer is split between our other two adult outpatient clinics. And they are part of the treatment team. They provide all different sorts of support, either short-term or longer-term. They do case management. They do consultation to the clinical staff on kind of peer issues, and really in helping the treatment teams be more recovery minded and consumer centered. So that's a real big value add in the service teams.
Thank you. Do you have anything else that you want to share with us?
Well, I think what we're wanting to do next is, and we had hoped to do it this year, but the budget situation caught us off guard, was we wanted to also add another position that would be still in the peer support classification, but would be a parent partner. And we do have somebody who happens to be a parent partner in their personal experience, who's in a mental health specialist classification, but we wanted to create a position that would be something that somebody who didn't have the same level of education but had that personal experience with the system. So we were hoping to do that this year, but weren't able to we weren't able to add any new positions this year because of the budget situation. So that's part of our next step, is to expand it into our children's system more significantly. And then also, I think that in most of our work groups and committees, at least those ones where we've got a peer support specialist who's interested in those topics, have peers on those committees as well. And I think that we'll want to do a little bit more work on getting peers or other peer volunteers more interested in joining the committees that they haven't been interested in joining. And sometimes it's a matter of training on the topic to help people feel like they understand what's have the full sort of depth of background on what's being covered and what is trying to be accomplished, so that they understand kind of what their contribution could be. I think there are probably some work groups where their potential contribution just isn't clear yet. And so that's something that I think we're gonna be working on.
That's wonderful. You're heading in the right direction. Thank you so much, Sandra, for joining us today.
All right. Thank you, Andrea, for having me and giving us the chance to talk about what we're doing in Solano.
So I'm really excited to introduce our next guest. Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health is, I like to refer to it as a beast. They are approaching an annual budget of $3 billion. They serve approximately 250,000 individuals every year. And they have over 300 sites co-located throughout the LA region. And I know that it's broken up into 8 service areas, but I just want to say that over the last several years, we have done multiple outreach events and trainings for both leadership and stakeholders. And I've been so grateful to be able to partner with Dr. Jonathan Sharon. He has been such a huge advocate for elevating the client voice. So with me today, Dr. Sharon. Hello.
Hi, Andrea. Thank you so much for having me and inviting me to talk a bit about the stakeholder process that we're developing, as well as kind of the importance of the peer voice and, frankly, the peer role to inform our organization from the inside out. The first thing I'd like to say about stakeholder engagement is that Stakeholder engagement is a way for us to learn about what's happening at a grassroots level in our communities. That information is gold. It's only when we get that information and when that information is distilled and well coordinated that we can kind of bring it into the department to inform our programs, our practices, and our deployment of resources. So there's really, at some level, nothing more important than hearing from what I like to call the trenches about what's going on, because that's where you learn about the gap. And I would say that I look to the communities, I look to the neighborhoods, I look to households, I look to individual people that are receiving resources, services, opportunities. I also am very, very sensitive to the frontline providers, because frontline providers have that real sacred interface with community, with people, and that's really what matters. My goal is to find out what's going on there and to empower it to get the best outcomes. In terms of the stakeholder process, when I showed up, there was really, I would say, a central body that met. And that central body, to me, and I'm just going to speak frankly, felt like it had been dominated by many of the same people over a long period of time who were very involved and are great people. I also felt like my interest is in hearing the consumer voice, the stakeholder voice around those who are receiving services, not the voice of contractors, and not voice of I would say, managerial staff. The managerial staff in the department work for me, and they can talk to me, they can email me all the time. And the same thing with contractors. In other words, the business operations are really not a part of what I'm focused on when I say the trench. So what I did is try to figure out, well, hey, how do we push out a much more robust and I would say genuine stakeholder engagement process? And we created really a large program, a program umbrella, which we call Your DMH. And what we did really is to say, hey, instead of having one centralized body that we really invest in and where we deliberate things, let's make sure that each service area is equipped with a similar investment. So what we've done is we've really pushed out funding, support, to develop platforms in each service area. And at those platforms, we have the seats that are mandated by MHSA. And we have 8 of those platforms, not 1, 8. And you can imagine that that's actually it's a big effort. And I wish it was going more quickly, but it is moving, and it's moving steadily. And we've got great commitment from the department. And I believe that the communities are really starting to embrace it and understand how much it means to the department, and frankly, to the future of our relationship and to the well-being of Los Angeles County. The other thing that we've done is to embolden and enrich the support for our underserved cultural communities. The underserved cultural communities have been around for a while, and the number of kind of stakeholder groups or communities has expanded, but by giving more funding and more staff commitment, I believe that we've kind of elevated the energy and the ability for those underserved cultural community groups to have a voice. I'll also say that one of the things that's been missing, in my opinion, around underserved cultural communities is the young people. We don't have, I mean, kids are like, they're the engineers of the future. And we don't know exactly how to serve them. And frankly, they would probably say that they're underserved. So what we're doing is we're looking at that, at young people as an underserved cultural community to create a new group. In fact, we're not even going to create a new group. We're going to leverage a group that was mandated by the Board of Supervisors to help advise the county on youth matters. And I think that that's kind of a gold mine. Why are we not going to them and talking to them about the mental health issues? So the idea here is to be fluid, to be structured, and to push out enough resource to support groups and distill the information. Now, for each of these groups, whether it's in the service area, and we call our 8 service area stakeholder groups service area leadership teams, or SALTs, and at our underserved cultural communities, we have co-chairs. And those co-chairs come together on a monthly basis as a group to talk about what they've learned. What have you learned from a certain group that's underserved? What have you learned from the seats of the individuals mandated by MHSA in each service area? And the key there, particularly around the seats, is if you're, for example, a veteran, it's not about you as a veteran. It's about the veterans that you represent by sitting in that seat. And you have to iterate with veterans all month long in order to bring back that information to your SALT. And then the co-chairs who represent the individual bodies come together and they share their information. And the department's role is not to set the agenda. The department's role is to support the effort.
Right.
The department's role is to say, what have you learned? How can we distill the information? How can we turn it into recommendations that ultimately come to me?
Right.
And also to the mental health board. Because at some level, the mental health board, the commission, really plays a key role. They have a responsibility to the Board of Supervisors to make sure that the stakeholder process is genuine and that it's robust. And they, by engaging with that group of co-chairs, which we call our community leadership team, that can be ensured.
May I ask just a follow-up question regarding your SALTs? Have you found with the new structure under your DMH that you're getting new people involved that have historically not had a voice?
It's a great question, and the answer is yes. We've had elections around who are the co-chairs. And I'm saying, as you know, it's not going to be a DMH staff member, and it's not going to be a contractor.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be someone from the community who's elected.
So you have individuals that are receiving services within the behavioral or
services,
former
advocates, family members, and we actually pay a small stipend because it's a responsibility. You have to meet with your people. You have to interface with the department that's providing the platform, and you have to then bring it centrally and share what your group, what your stakeholder group has learned and what it's saying. What it's saying is good, bad, ugly, and also getting information centrally and bringing it back out to the SALT.
Right.
And it's the same thing for the underserved cultural communities. But that's really that. Right. So those are some fundamental changes. Look, this is a massive jurisdiction.
Right.
And the work that was done getting us here was incredible. I don't mean to say that it wasn't. So much effort went into creating a stakeholder process. And, since I came on board, we're really just trying to take it to the next level. The other thing I'll say is that the peer voice has to be a fundamental driver. You get the peer voice if you have clients who are distributed around these different groups of stakeholders. You have the peer voice if you have peers or individuals who have lived experience or have been served on your commission. But more than that, you also have to, I would say, in this day and age, have peers be informing the department from inside the department. This county and our supervisors and certain advocates at the state and certainly other counties have been pushing real hard to get California a peer support and certification bill. Unfortunately, we have failed several times because the governor has refused to sign. And I've spoken with our new governor about this personally. And there's a new one, 803, which may not be exactly what we would want, but I think it's got life. And the reason why it's so important is to set the standards, to let people know what peer services mean. What do peer support services mean? It's not case management. It's leveraging shared experience, lived experience. And that in and of itself is a discipline. I'm sorry, go ahead, Andrea.
No, I was just going to say that I've been hearing that it's a little shaky right now because of lack of support from DHCS, but I am wondering, even without a certification, there is a lot of evidence base around how and who provides peer support services. And I am wondering if maybe you could share a little bit about how you've been implementing peers in the workforce through either county positions or your community-based organizations, and how you've been using them to help really elevate individuals with lived experience, as well as are you measuring any of that? Do you have any meaningful recovery outcomes that you're able to maybe measure with peers that are receiving services from a multidisciplinary team that also includes peer support services, as opposed to those that haven't been?
Yeah, well, those are all really great questions. And I would like to say that we were really far down the road in all those areas. And I'm not going to say because we haven't had the bill and access to Medicaid that that's the only barrier. I mean, it's very difficult in these bureaucratic systems to implement, frankly, just about anything. But yes, we do. And I think LA County, and I'm sure other counties, has had peer involvement in staff and programs for a long period of time. We've been trying, and certainly since I've been trying to elevate their role. We, as many of you know, have the kind of the pleasure and the honor of being joined by Kiris Myrek, who's really a national figure and an absolute subject matter expert, who, by the way, I talked earlier about being informed on the inside by peers. I've probably learned as much or more from Kiris since she's been on board than I have anybody else that I've ever spent time with as a mental health professional. We have created really what we consider kind of a template in our headquarters. Our headquarters on the bottom floor on the corner of 6th and Vermont was kind of like barricaded. And I wondered what's going on there. And eventually kind of on my own, because we had homeless people leaning up against the barricades, went into the back, got through security, and saw that there was this huge space that was filled with tools and boxes and dirt and old equipment. And we managed to kind of clear it all out. And we managed to pull off the barricades and to open up a peer resource center. And that peer resource center has been providing an amazing amount of service. It's a place for people to come that's welcoming, where there's inclusion. It's a place to learn about resources that are available all across the county. It's a place to rest, relax, and get respite. It's also a place where the peers who we've hired are going out and doing work. They go and do sorties around the building and around the neighborhood to find people who are suffering, to get people off of the street. And I've met people that have come in through our peers who have told me unequivocally that their lives were saved by the peers that have deployed from the Peer Resource Center. Now, it's a template, and what I'm saying is we need it all over the county.
Right.
We need it in every service area, and we needed kind of peer resource activities built into all of our clinical domains to keep people engaged, to create opportunities for people to have jobs, and really to foster the kind of welcoming environments that we in our field need. That's a big part of our challenge as a field, is engagement. But it's not just in the clinics, and it's not just around community. It's also in the crisis system. So many of you may know that we've developed what we call therapeutic transport service, which really I initially was, I used to call it the mental health ambulance because people kind of know what that means. But in the field, when someone's having a crisis, we go out as a department and we, try to address the situation. And if a person needs to be transported, we have to wait hours for an ambulance and someone gets strapped in, or get police to come. And then you get sometimes cuffed and thrown into the back of the car. How incredibly inappropriate and traumatic and frankly, I would say inhumane in the context of a mental health crisis. Now, if there's serious behavioral issues or if there's serious medical problems, you would want law enforcement to help and you would want the medical EMTs to be there. But We don't see that as always the case. So what we've done is we've got these very large, comfortable vans that have a bench. They have a team of 2, which includes a nurse and a peer, and the peer is the lead. And a separate compartment with a driver. They have monitors where we have telepsychiatry available. And we're now beginning to push out efforts to engage health and human service needs in the community with health and human service resources, such as our own, as opposed to relying way too much on law enforcement. And I would say that in the post-George Floyd murder era, we are all compelled to innovate around this area and to reinvest in a different type of public safety that is rooted in public health.
That's awesome. Thank you. I know, I read a little bit about that program, and I was really excited because I think that just from my own personal lived experience, when you're in that crisis phase, when you're already terrified, to be able to be met with somebody that has that shared lived experience is just so incredibly healing. And so thank you so much for your commitment to really embracing and elevating the peer movement and the recovery movement. And I just know what, LA is just, it's hard because you can't really compare it to any other California county. But I do know that there are other counties in California that are just really starting to create county classifications for peer positions, starting to create programs with community-based organizations that are going to be beginning to hire peers. Some counties are just now starting their MHSA steering committees. So I'm just wondering, do you have any words of advice that you'd like to give to some of those counties, and maybe on lessons learned or anything you'd like to share?
Well, I mean, it's a great question, and I do believe that that the counties and the county directors are really working as a team more and more, and I think we do need to share our findings and our learnings. And one of the things about having a bill, it would just cement that at a whole new level. We have been doing the same work. I mean, we're trying to get very specific peer items, which we have, but also a career ladder and supervisory controls for peers. We have not gotten there yet. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that people just don't really understand, because this is not something that fits into a medical model. It's a recovery model. It's a community model. It's a social model, which is really, frankly, the fundamental foundation of community-based mental health. So people really, I think, in bureaucratic systems can't quite wrap their heads around it. And again, a peer bill would help, because it really, at some level, it validates the need for a very, very specific type of service. We're creating more and more positions for people with lived experience, and we're using whatever items, frankly, we can get a hold of right now, until we can get more peer items, develop supervisory structures, through not just the department, but centralized administration, because it's not up to us really to define exactly what a position is, what's the scope of practice. And then, of course, outside of the county, being able to document and being able to draw down funding is really critical in order for us to get to the capacity that we need. Because in addition to the community-based stuff, in addition to helping to build out and support all the crisis work, the institutions, the open air asylum of the street and the closed asylum of the jail requires us to step up with peers and people that have lived experience that can kind of change the level of trust that's been lost for so many of those people for so long, and to provide the kinship that people don't have. When you spend time incarcerated and you spend time in the streets, particularly if you have profound mental illness, the level of isolation in many cases, if not most cases, is significant. And it's by bringing in that lived experience, by bringing in a trusted agent, that we can change the engagement and we can change the trajectory of individual lives and, frankly, our communities going forward.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, I love seeing you and talking to you, and it's of course I would prefer it in person, but we'll get there.
Yes, we will.
Okay, bye, Andrea.
Bye.